So I've just completed the second in a series of 4 books that I bought by accident by an author that you probably have never heard of. I finished the first one, Whirlpool of Stars. Oh my god, those covers. Oh, those covers. Anyway, I finished that a while back. I don't think I ever reviewed it. I've just finished the second one. That's Hook, the Boosted Man, and I've got 2 more to go. A little goes a long way, so it's not the fastest read. Now, you've probably never heard of this author. I hadn't either. The author is Hook, the Boosted Man, number 2 in a mind-spinning new series by Tully Zetford, of whom I had never heard. Perhaps you've never heard. It's apparently one of the many pseudonyms of an author named Kenneth Bulmer. Kenneth Bulmer was a UK author, born in 1920s, died sadly in the early 2000s. He was prolific. He wrote mainly science fiction, and he used many pseudonyms, Tully Zetford being one of them. Right, as I said, I bought these 4 by accident. Now, how do you buy 4 books by accident? Not 1, but 4. Here's how. One of my favourite second-hand bookshops is in Brisbane. It's called Archives. Most people who are readers, we have our libraries of our dreams. Well, this is the second-hand bookshop of your dreams. It's in this huge old hall that smells of books and silence and happiness. And it's got shelves and shelves, most of them twice as tall as I am. Any type of book that you can imagine. It's got rare books, it's got music sheets, it's got different languages. I heart it. I don't get there very often anymore since I don't live in Brisbane. And I went there not that long ago, a few months maybe. I had limited time. I think I had about 20-30 minutes tops in this shop, which can easily swallow 3 hours without me noticing it. I had 2 or 3 specific books that I went to look for. Once I'd done that, I browsed the fantasy and science fiction section, as I always do. Full of books, every bit as old and dilapidated and 15th hand as most of my bookshelf is, many of which came from there. The last thing I ever do in this fantasy and science fiction shelf is check out the Roger Zelazny's. Roger Zelazny is one of my all-time favourite authors, for no good reason that I can explain, but I adore every single word of his I've ever read. I haven't read them all. I own many of his books, but certainly not all of them. So I always check Z for Zelazny. And there I was, down in the bottom right shelf of the science fiction section, working against time. There were minutes that I had left to check for Roger Zelazny. And then, to my surprise and delight, my heart leapt as I realised there were 4, not 1, but 4 Roger Zelaznys that not only did I not own, not only did I not read, but I had never heard of. It seemed unbelievable, so I grabbed them without a second thought, ran with them and my other purchases to the desk, ran out and was not late to my next appointment. And only later, getting them home, did I realise that this was not Roger Zelazny. This was Tully Zetford, of whom I'd never heard. Oh well, it was funny. The titles were hokey. The covers are hysterically funny. I thought, well, I'll read them. And I started reading them. And the very first one that I read, they're not problem-free, but the overwhelming feeling that I got from them was they reminded me incredibly, beyond belief, of E.C. Tubbs' Earl Demarest series, which begins with The Winds of Gath. I own nearly every single one of that series. I've never managed to get my hands on the last one. But this was so similar in format that I actually thought that perhaps Tully Zetford and E.C. Tubb were the same person, and that's why I googled the author, because I wanted to see. Tully Zetford sounded like a pseudonym. I wanted to know if it was Roger Zelazny. It isn't. But both Kenneth Bulmer and E.C. Tubb were UK science fiction writers in the same era. They have appeared in the same compendiums. They have occasionally curated each other's work, so I think there's no doubt that these two authors knew each other. Now, the reason that this series is similar to the Earl Dummerest is the main character and the general format of the galaxy. These books take place in a galaxy where humankind has spread to the stars. They've spread like sand across the universe. There's hundreds of different stars and star systems inhabited by hundreds of different aliens and humans and humanoids and variations. The two are very similar. The difference is that in Hook's series, Earth isn't a lost planet like it is in the E.C. Tubb books. But the main character is very similar in both. I guess Rider Hook and Earl Dummerest vary in that Rider Hook is described as an ugly man, whereas E.C. Tubb's Earl Dummerest is described as incredibly handsome. They're both loners, they're both incredibly competent, they're riding the galaxy in their own way. One of the things that made me think that Tully Zetford might be E.C. Tubb was when Rider Hook in number 1 mentions riding low and riding high through the galaxy, which is a concept that E.C. Tubb explored at length, and I don't think I've ever read anyone else that really explored that too much. Anyway, in this, the second one, Rider Hook is not travelling low, he's travelling high. They've just landed on a planet, and as the people are getting off the shuttle to go into customs, screaming uproar arises. These people infected with some sort of weird fungus that is dissolving them even as they run, they're all streaming out of planet's customs trying to get at the shuttle. Rider Hook, as he is, strong He-Man of action, kicks the last of them out the door, shoots one or two down, I think maybe, makes it to the shuttle with as many people as he can. They take off. The pilot, a young man who's rattled, tells the mothership that there's sickness on the face of the planet they were trying to land on. The mothership refuses to let them back on the ship. Rather than go back to this infected planet, Rider Hook, I nearly said Earl Dummerest, they're that similar, directs the shuttle to another planet that is uninhabited and on which he thinks they have a better chance of survival. When they get there, however, they find it's not wholly uninhabited. There's a spaceship and there's a signal which brings them in. And this is where we find out that this planet is inhabited in a sort of subterfuge way by Rider Hook's old-time, long-term, whatever, opponents, the Boosted Men. So the Boosted Men was a program that Earth started to make basically supermen. And Rider Hook was subjected to the program but was never finished. So he gets all the superhuman accomplishments, but only if he's within certain distance of other Boosted Men. And when they hit this planet, they're put to work, and it turns out that the planet is being run by Boosted Men for some mysterious purpose that I won't bother telling you about. And that all the people that they can get there are workers who are being brainwashed by these radio waves to think they're living in luxury and eating delights, when in fact they're living in squalor, they're being worked to death, and they are all slowly dying. When Rider Hook discovers that, he decides he needs to escape, not only himself, but the people, as many of the people he can bring from the shuttle that he commandeered to get them there. And in the meantime, a good friend of his has been hailed to rescue them when he thought that there was an uninhabited planet and they'd need rescuing. This particular character is one that's mentioned in the first one but doesn't appear. And V's name is Taynor Shail, maybe. And in this book, it expands a little bit more on what Taynor Shail is. Taynor Shail is a hermaphrodite, and that is not anything to do with any of the gender questions that we've got on Earth today. The hermaphrodites were created apparently by an Earth breeding program back in the early days of space, when they wanted to minimize the number of people that they could send into space, but they wanted to maximize the genetic output at the other end. Their response was to make hermaphrodites, a thing that is, I doubt if modern science could manage it, but guess what? The innovation of science fiction in the 20s, 30s, in the 70s, 60s and 70s, you could imagine that. They changed the plumbing so that the hermaphrodite could be a mother while fertilizing another hermaphrodite, so they were both father and mother at the same time to two different children. It's kind of cute. It's very naive. There's lots that's very naive about this book. Like the E.C. Tubb books, it will not be for everyone. There's a strong cavalier, man of action feel that a lot of the Westerns had. It's it's misogynistic, it's misanthropic, it's miss everything. If you can think of something that you will be offended by, I am sure that somewhere in here Tully Zetford managed to put it. It's not terribly well written in some ways. I mean, in a way, it's a bit like eating licorice all sorts. While you're eating the licorice all sorts, you're aware that there's something slightly disgusting about it, even while you're enjoying the hell out of it. Too many of them is very easy to achieve. Too much of this would be very easy to achieve. But in the meantime, when you crave some licorice, or maybe when Dutch licorice all sorts, one of those things. While you're eating it's very Moorish, and you keep on eating it until you've overloaded. And I think these books, like the E.C. Tubb books, like Licorice All Sorts, would be very much like that. There's so much that's wrong and dated, and yet they are still so enjoyable. If you enjoy this sort of stuff, pulp science fiction, what my father would have called a potboiler of the worst kind, and yet the bad writing is still a lot better than a lot of modern writing. A lot of modern regular fiction and young adult fiction could learn from this, because there's a word count to hear. It's 110 pages. It's 110 pages. It's very, very thin, but that's deceptive, because the actual letters are probably no more than 2 millimeters high, with another 2 millimeters from line to line. Anyone who's used to the 0.13 writing today with 5 centimeters between each line is going to find this difficult to read. Actually, this type of writing is probably why so many of my mother's generation and my generation are part blind and need reading glasses, now I come to think of it. Anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved every minute of the hokey, totally unbelievable, totally weird sci-fi. This is the sort of epitome of classic sci-fi. It's beyond speculative, it's wholly imaginary, and it's a lot of fun. But I probably need a palate freshener before I read another one. So if you love E.C. Tubb's Winds of Gath, Earl Dummerest series, and you haven't encountered Tully Zetford, which I hadn't, then I think you'll probably like Hook in exactly the same way that you like the Winds of Gath. It's worth trying anyway, if you can find it. Oh yes, YouTube wants you to like or comment or subscribe. I want you to talk to me about books, but YouTube wants the lot.